Hey folks, Reno here. This is my second video today, and this one is going to be a rant. So I did a video a while back titled MRA Hysteria, which was in response to Voice for Men broadcast, and I had some real problems with their methodology, with the factual accuracy of what they were saying. And most of the comments that were made in that video thread at least addressed the points that were brought up. But there was one user whose comments were so over the top that first I blocked her, but I felt that I had to address them. So the first comment that she left, actually I had no problem with, just as an expression of opinion. I'll read it here. The Plenty Sense writes, "You won't find any citations on any of the MRA's so-called data because the MRA movement is a pack of lies designed to paint men as victims and heroes instead of the stats. This is hate propaganda with a bald face. Many men eat this stuff up because they are bitter that they cannot get a woman to be at their beck and call anymore, as women move into paying jobs and can afford to avoid men who want them to put up with horribly slanted relationships based on yesterday's men's power privileges. Bye, guys." And, okay, that's fine. I mean, you have problems with what she says there or not. It's her opinion. But she goes on to make another comment. "MRAs like to paint men as heroes who protect women and die in wars, when the truth is that men lack the leadership skills to work collaboratively and lust after war, and that women are the greatest casualties of war, which is completely ignored. Nobody ever invaded America, and there has been nothing to defend us against. Case in point, 10 years in Afghanistan and women are still being jailed, beaten, and stoned for being raped. It's out in the open, but no soldier is going to go rescue her, is he?" And this was my reply. Well, there are a couple things I would like to correct you on. First, men do have the capacity to work collaboratively and exercise leadership. Most men have no trouble dealing with other people. As a veteran myself, I take some offense to the suggestion that soldiers lust after war and would never go help a woman who was a victim. War is a complicated thing, and it leaves many victims. Hopefully, we can make some progress in the future. Now, I think it's a very polite reply. Obviously, there's a lot in her statement that I didn't address, but, I mean, this was a peace offering. What she said here was just absolutely absurd and offensive, drawing this line that somehow war is a gender issue, that there's men on one side and women on the other, that women aren't involved in the decision-making processes that lead to war being declared, that women don't participate in armed conflict, and that men aren't victims themselves. But that was my reply. And what I got back a couple days later was 3 replies. I will read them in sequence. "You watched crowds of men beating and burying women up to their shoulders in the middle of the town square, then stoning her for being raped." No, never happened. I mean, I never saw that. "You watched from satellite and did nothing. The excuse that it's cultural is bullshit." I never said that. "You fought the Taliban for oil, not for the real victims of the Taliban, which are women." I was involved with actions in Iraq, not Afghanistan. "You are not protectors and providers. 16,000 rapes in the U.S. military in 2009. Your war games need to stop. You are not heroes. You are easily led fools, paid corporate guns for hire. It's a man's world, you say. You invented everything." I never said that. I never would. By you, I assume you mean men. "You are the leaders, right?" Did I say that? You said men are incapable of leadership. Can you back that up? "Then why does 75% of the world not have enough food, shelter, or clean water?" What does that have to do with men? "You know how to collaboratively solve problems? BS." Oh, go fuck yourself. "Why haven't you taken care of basic needs?" A lot of people have their basic needs met. You have plenty of energy for war, but none for digging wells, mending roads, plowing fields. Are you suggesting that no man in the world digs wells, mends roofs, or plows fields? Are you honestly suggesting that the majority of every man's life in the world is spent fighting a war? You twat. Why? Because you don't get an adrenaline rush from it. I get adrenaline rush from reading books. I get adrenaline rush from arguing, from making videos. I have the number of degrees I have because I get an adrenaline rush from learning. Men evolved as predatory hunters. Again, go fuck yourself. You are wired for the adrenaline of war. Get a grip. Because I'm the one leaving all caps and multiple punctuation marks. What do soldiers have to do with Operation Freedom? Women pay taxes for your war machine and you ignore the real victims. Everyone pays taxes. The World Health Organization says over 80% of the victims of war are women. More on that later. You warmongers are creating poverty and death all over the world. As for freeing the hundreds of women in jail for being raped, disgrace that you didn't do it. What, me personally? Absolute shame. It would have been easy. You kill when you want to for money and power, but you don't do anything for women who pay for you. Okay. This is a crazy person. This is a crazy person, and I have blocked her. I may unblock her after doing this video, but honestly, I don't see the point. I don't see that anything that she has to say or contribute will be of value. And that's really my thought on what she wrote. But she threw out some numbers here that I'm going to address. 80% of the victims of war are women. Now, I looked this up. I tried to track this down. She says the World Health Organization. But as near as I can tell, this actually comes from a 2007 UN report called called The Impact of Armed Conflict for Women. Impact of Armed Conflict on Women, which was published by the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. It's only a one-page paper, linked below. And it says, women bear disproportionately the consequences of wars and suffer violations of human rights in situations of armed conflict, including terrorism, torture, disappearance, rape, ethnic cleansing, family separation, and displacement. Moreover, they endure lifelong social and psychological traumas, along with children. Women constitute 80% of the world's refugees and displaced persons. Now, this is not what she said. Women, along with children, represent 80% of displaced and refugees. One of the reasons that number is so high is because in situations where this occurs, their husbands have been killed. Now, you could say there's less suffering involved in being killed by an armed conflict, more suffering involved in being displaced. I mean, that's fine. But to say that the men who were killed in a war are not victims is absolutely absurd. And it's not what this says. In fact, the point of the 2007 study is to do exactly what she says never happens. To put the spotlight on the victimization of women in armed conflicts and just the effects that war has on the people who survive. Now, the United Nations went on in March of 2010, did a follow-up. In fact, they do these sorts of things annually. This paper I'm linking below, more recent, is called Unite to End Violence Against Women. Published by the International Committee of the Red Cross. In cooperation with the UN. Okay. Now, there's a disclaimer in this paper that this is not necessarily the view of the United Nations, it's the view of the paper, but they go to depth here to talk about their thoughts, their concerns, and their methodology. Women's experience of war is multifaceted, they write. It can mean separation from or the death of loved ones. And that's important. When wars occur, people do not suffer as individuals. You can be victimized as an individual, but you do not suffer as an individual. You suffer from the loss of community. Don't think that the violence and humiliation inflicted on one woman can be distinguished from the anguish that she feels from losing loved ones, particularly fathers, brothers, husbands, sons, the people who are killed in these conflicts that someone like the Plenty Sense just wants to dismiss, just out of hand, consider disposable, as an MRA would say, simply because they are not women. And this person, the Plenty Sense, does not value their experience, the fact that they are killed in the conflict. Talking point number 2 is abandon the limited perception of women as victims or vulnerable. And again, this is important because this is what she's doing. As the ICRC argues, and this is the kind of feminism that I endorse, that I support, in order to reduce the suffering of women in war, women as a group have to come together and understand that they are not a class, they are not a category of victims. Although the study reaffirms that they are especially vulnerable to victimization in times of war, the conclusion that they reach, the terms vulnerable and victim are not synonymous with women and demonstrates a limited understanding of women's experience in wartime. They go on to state, as I pointed out earlier, women are decision makers in democratic countries. Women are producers. Women are part of any war effort in terms of producing food, material, munitions, and so forth that go into supporting the conflict. Women should be involved in the planning, implementation, and evaluation of assistance programs carried out in their favor. So just as women are not absolutely passive in the role of victim, women have to be actively engaged in the process of recovery. As I said, this is the kind of feminism that I endorse. In order for us to get anywhere, we all have to be actively engaged. This is not a matter of men coming in to save the day for women who have been victimized, which is what the Plenty Sense is implying here, that if women are unjustly jailed, then it needs to be men who come in the form of white knights to free them from jail. Well, no. The men and women of those countries, and this is not cultural BS, the men and women of those countries need to be involved in changing the system that they live in. We have to empower not just ourselves, but each other for social justice. That's the only place it can come from. Talking point number 4, sexual violence is unacceptable and not inevitable. Now, if men were predatory hunters designed for the adrenaline rush of war, this point would be insensible. But I agree with it. Sexual violence is expressly prohibited in international humanitarian law. Acts of sexual violence are not inevitable. As a culture, we, all of us, men and women alike, refuse to accept, refuse to validate the thought process of a rapist, then there will simply be, if not none, far less instances of this particular egregious crime. So my final thoughts here, in terms of the effectiveness of this kind of argumentation, this kind of ranting that the Plenty Sense is using, is it only does harm. It does nothing for the position that you are trying to take. It makes you look ridiculous. This over-the-top, bare assertions, sweeping generalizations, and misuse of statistics, taking reported statistics not in their context, not in terms of the organic and important debates in which they occur, but as a weapon that you can use, in this case, to vilify all men. It's absolutely unacceptable. I don't accept it from MRAs, which is why I put that video up. I don't accept it from feminists, and I don't accept it from the apolitical either. Demonization, vilification, and the objectively wrong manipulating of statistics is abhorrent. Before you leave bilious comments like this on anyone's comment thread, think to yourself how it's actually going to affect them. Okay, you'll get them upset. You'll get some vindication in the fact that you vented. But you're going to go on and have the effect of discrediting the people that are ostensibly on your side. Now the thing is, I know plenty of feminists out there who are going to disown this kind of argument. And I know feminists out there who will claim it. For those of you who will claim it, understand this is what makes misogyny. This is what makes the MRA movement. This is what feeds them and gets them going. The fact that there's people out there making these kinds of arguments, these hateful, slanderous, sweeping generalizations that men are evil. And it doesn't just draw men away from feminism. It doesn't just draw men away from looking at these issues. It turns women off too. Because most women don't want to be in a conflict with men. Most women haven't actually been treated all that badly by men as a group. What all of us want is to get along. Now, for many of us, that's in the context of being able to do our own thing without interference, but for all of us, that involves some level of social interaction. And social interaction between men and women that isn't tainted by this kind of ludicrous hatred. That is what's healthy, and that is what will fix us. Not continuing to focus on all of the bad in the world and how angry it makes you feel. I mean, go talk to these women themselves, the victims that you claim to be standing up for. Most of the time you'll find that they have a lot more positive image of men, of life, of what we as a species are doing than you do. And they're the ones who've been victimized. It's not acceptable, but the death of a man isn't worth any less than the humiliation of women. You need to get this out of your head, and you need to get your priorities straight. Because until you do, you're not going to have anything worthwhile to contribute.